Hello, my name is Sam Feltham and welcome to Expert Interviews here on Smash the Fat. With me today is a general practitioner and functional medical doctor. Bringing those two combinations together is going to be a real thing to watch out for in the future. Our guest today is going to talk a bit more about that in just a moment. It's Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. How you doing, Rangan?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. Hi, Sam. How are you?
Fantastic, absolutely fantastic. So I first became aware of you via a blog that was kind of shared about called Why Low Fat Eating Makes You Fat. I gave that a read, absolutely fantastic advice and great to hear it from an NHS general practitioner doctor, which is absolutely fantastic, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about today. Your work as a GP and a functional medicine doctor as well. But before we kind of get into all of that, just tell us how you kind of became a doctor, why you became a doctor, and kind of how you came to be where you are today.
Yeah, okay, thanks, Sam. So I've been a doctor now for about 13 years, 13 and a half years. My dad was a doctor, so I was always exposed to that growing up. I've always liked talking to people, getting to know them, trying to see how I can help them. And the natural extension for me was to study medicine and become a doctor. I went to Edinburgh Medical School, and initially I started training to be a specialist. So I did my specialist exams. I was going to do nephrology. And as I was practicing in a specialist sense, I realized that I didn't want to just focus on the kidney. I thought, well, I want to see the whole patient. I want to see what else is going on that's impacting them. So I moved to general practice to try and get a more complete picture of what was happening with someone and how I might help them better. And really, in my 7 years in general practice, I realized that a lot of the time, we just manage symptoms. And a lot of the time, I was genuinely feeling that, are we actually making these people better? Are we giving them the information that's going to help them get better? Or are we just giving them a pill to suppress a symptom? And it was very counterintuitive to me. And so really that's where I am today. I'm very interested in finding the root cause of problems and what's going on and how can I engage with that patient and empower them to make changes long-term that's going to help them, rather than just suppress their symptoms. And a big turning point for me was, I think 4 years ago. I was always interested in nutrition, but 4 years ago, my son, he was 6 months old, and he nearly died. And he basically had been breastfed for 6 months, as per what we get told is the best advice. Yet he had a convulsion that was caused by a low calcium, which was caused by a low vitamin D. And, really, it struck me quite hard that my son nearly died from a problem that was from a correctable nutritional vitamin deficiency. And the guilt as a father that had happened to my son really aggressively led me on a journey to study what started being vitamin D, but also nutrition in general. And when I started looking, the amount of nutritional science that is there is overwhelming. And I thought, well, we've not been taught any of this. We don't practice any of this, and it's utter madness. So that really led me on this journey where I started to read a lot about nutrition. I go to America regularly to train with the Institute of Functional Medicine, which is basically about looking at the root cause of problems. And I love it. You can reverse diabetes. You can manage and get autoimmune disease a lot better. Sometimes you can cure it simply with diet and nutritional interventions. And for me, I was saying, well, why are we giving toxic drugs potentially when we don't need to? And that's kind of where I am. That's kind of why I'm here today doing what I'm doing. I always look to diet and nutrition first. And if I can't do it with that, it's at that point I consider medication.
Definitely, and it is kind of that ancient saying that Hippocrates said, "Let food be thy medicine." I mean, it's been around for thousands of years, but we kind of lost our way a little bit, which is a bit of a shame. But thankfully, people like yourself, Dr. Chatterjee, are kind of bringing it back and kind of realizing how powerful this movement is, and how powerful diet, nutrition, exercise can actually be a powerful medical tool as well.
Yeah,
would you agree with that?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I think, through no fault of doctors, I might add,
no, yeah, definitely.
When you get the training, the bulk of our nutrition training is basically, eat a low-fat diet and exercise more. And frankly, if that was a way of even stemming or reversing the obesity, the diabetes, the heart disease, then we would be seeing a change in the direction of all these conditions, but we're not. And that's because that is not working, and we're not being given, as doctors, the advice that is necessary to impart to our patients to help them. And the advice is out there. There is science backing all of this up. The other thing that's really I'm passionate about is, my profession talks a lot about evidence-based medicine. Where's the evidence for this before we practice it? But evidence-based medicine is not just research evidence. That's one facet of it. It's also clinical expertise and patient preference. And there's been multiple articles on this. It's threefold. And I think we all always concentrate on what is the research evidence, and that is important. But in the real world, you've got a patient in front of you, and you've got to take into account their preferences and also your experience with what works. And I think that has value as well. Even if it's not in the literature, that actually has value, I think.
Definitely, kind of looking at it holistically, like that, from the patient's perspective as well as the doctor's perspective, is very, very important to kind of actual solutions, applications as well. So kind of let's get into why you're here today. Okay. Why is it that low-fat eating is making us fat?
Okay, so, it's a catchy headline for a blog to try and get people to read it, okay? But the reality is, I see day in, day out, patients coming to see me, they're struggling to lose weight, they're struggling to change their lipid profile, and they're saying, doctor, I'm following this low-fat diet, I count my calories, and yet you see it's not working. And I know why it's not working, because I read about nutrition, but even though in plenty of circles on the internet, people are aware of this, my sort of standard NHS patient gets their information from the media. And genuinely, if I tell them to increase the amount of fat in their diet, they're panicking. Oh, doctor, I can't have almonds because, it's high in fat. And it's almost like this is one of the 10 commandments. You just can't shake people's opinions sometimes. It's, I cannot eat fat. And really what I've realized is that, just through my experience, is that if you increase the amount of fat in people's diets, great things start to happen, just without even trying. So the reason low-fat eating, in my opinion, makes people fat is because if you are cutting down the amount of fat in your diet, most people are increasing the amount of carbohydrate in the diet, particularly refined carbohydrate. Mm-hmm. When you're doing that, your hormones in your body are changing. Essentially, you have a big bowl of cereal in the morning. It's a very, very common story I hear every day. I'm sure you do, Sam. Mm-hmm. I have a bowl of cornflakes, but I'm at my desk at 10 o'clock, 10:30. I'm starving. I've still got 2 hours to lunch. I've got to grab something. So they grab a quick fix like a biscuit or a muffin to get them through. And actually, you can explain, once you explain to them why that's happening, they get it. So you're having all these carbohydrates, which, yes, they are low fat, but they're loaded in sugar. So your blood sugar rises, you secrete insulin, 2 to 3 hours later, your blood sugar crashes. It's at that point you're hungry again and you start eating other sugary snacks. And what's really interesting about that is that you are hungry at that point. You're not making it up. Your blood sugar is dropping. In terms of evolution, our blood sugar dropping is a very powerful fight or flight thing for us. Yeah, we do need to eat at that point. And so what they do, they eat more cornflakes the day after so that they're not hungry. It compounds the problem. They get a bigger blood sugar spike, a bigger insulin release, and they get a bigger crash. And so for me, it's not about I never tell patients to count calories. I always say, first thing, I don't want to look at calories. Because in my experience, and I'm not talking about athletes, I'm talking about my standard NHS patients, I find calorie counting counterproductive.
Mm-hmm.
I get them to focus on real whole foods, but particularly I find if patients have a high fat, I must qualify that, a good quality fat, so avocados, olives, fatty fish, coconuts, coconut oil, these kind of things. If they have that for breakfast with some protein, I find that they make better choices for the rest of the day without even trying. And that's the beauty of it. If you are constantly fighting hunger, and on low-fat diets, low-fat diets can give you weight loss, I think, in the short term. But what I find with it is that it never is sustainable because people are suppressing their hunger. That you can do that for a week, you can do it for 2 weeks, but hunger will always beat you at some point. If you're hungry, at some point you will just binge out on those biscuits because, I've been following this for 4 weeks and now I just can't cope anymore, I need to have it. Whereas I find if you increase the amount of fat in your diet, you make better choices and you're not fighting hunger. Fat makes you full. Fat doesn't give you blood sugar spikes. I know you know all this, Sam, but for me, it's amazing how many people, through no fault of their own, don't know this. And when I spend the time to educate them on that, they get it, they follow it. I do them a deal. I say, look, why don't you try this for 2 weeks? Okay, doctor, I'll try it for 2 weeks. So they come back in 2 weeks. I'll book you in now. So you don't have to phone her, wait to try and get an appointment, and then tell me how you feel. 9 times out of 10, they love it. They go, doctor, I'm not feeling hungry. I'm losing weight. I'm not even trying. And for me, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it really interests me that kind of low-fat diet advice kind of often leaves people kind of pointed towards fake foods almost as well for those very reasons. They're kind of fighting hunger and things like that, and they kind of grab the first thing of convenience, which tends to be crisps, chocolate bars, even cereal bars and things like that, and kind of it creates this vicious cycle of internal starvation. Their body fat is increasing, but they have this internal starvation within the body that they're trying to fuel with the very foods that's creating that internal starvation, which is kind of crazy, even though they're kind of accumulating more and more body fat. Which is an absolute crazy thing. But on top of that, as well, as you said, the scientific evidence is totally out there, and it's almost like a lot of health organisations are ignoring it. Now, kind of before this, we were chatting about my last interview with Dr. Damasi, who was the head reporter for the ABC Catalyst programme on low-carb, paleo-style diets. And a lot of health organisations have come out and kind of said that these diets are fads, they're unhealthy, and they're just completely unfounded. What would you say to that?
On the thing, on your sort of comment that a paleo diet can be a fad diet, I don't really understand that, given that it's probably our evolutionary diet. We've probably been eating that for millions of years, potentially. I would almost argue what we're eating now is a fad diet. It's a food experiment that is unfortunately going very, very badly wrong with serious consequences for us. Look, I don't like the word diet too much because it implies to me and to my patients temporary kind of food restriction to sort of reach a certain goal. I prefer, changing the way that we eat potentially, which has sort of long-term sustainability. But I absolutely refute that this is a fad diet. How does eating healthy foods, real whole foods, constitute a fad? I don't agree with that, and I find actually if there was one diet that if I could write and make up a diet that I think is perfect for reversing or at least improving diabetes, it would probably be the paleo diet, because the sort of food that it encourages you are by definition, you're cutting out processed, refined carbohydrates. In so many ways, it is the diet, in my opinion, to reverse diabetes. And I put a lot of my patients, certainly as a trial, on a paleo-type diet. Now, I'm not too precious on, what is paleo, what is not paleo. I'm talking generally about whole food-based diet where you've got lots of vegetables in there. Yeah, you can have animal protein, I've got no problem with that. You can have good amounts of fat. But I want people to cut out these refined carbohydrates that, yeah, we call them low fat. But hey, you know what I say to patients? I say, look, what's the term beer belly? And they go, yeah, I know the term beer belly, doctor. I said, well, how much fat is in beer, do you think? They go, actually, yeah, beer hasn't got any fat. I said, yeah, exactly. I mean, I try and use examples that people can relate to. Rather than quote them a scientific study, I try as a doctor to find, actually, what can my patient relate to? How am I going to connect with them to make them actually take my advice, and then they can see for themselves. And, they get the whole beer belly thing where, beer has no fat and yet it gives me a belly. It's the same thing. I draw them that graph of blood sugar and insulin. I said, this is what is driving that belly. It's not fat, it's carbohydrates. But the studies I do like talking to them about are the studies that are done with almonds, where, people who snap on almonds, they've done it with equivalent calories and carbohydrates. People on the almonds lose more weight. Their abdominal circumference comes down. They feel fuller for longer. And these are high-fat foods. An almond is a high-fat food. People look at calories. I think this whole calorie thing also is another bugbear of mine, because there may be some instances where calories are useful to talk about with certain clients, athletes or whoever. But I find in my experience that your standard non-athletic patient, I don't think calorie counting is productive. I mean, when in evolution have we ever counted the calories of what we're eating? I'm not saying it hasn't got a place. Ultimately, we have to burn off more calories than our body is actually storing. But that doesn't equate to calories on food. The whole point, we're missing metabolic rate, we're missing hormonal balance. If you eat less, your metabolic rate changes. So it doesn't. Yeah, the net sort of gain on calories is important at the end result. But if we back up a little bit, it's not the whole story. And I find if you eat real foods, whole foods, you limit, if not eliminate, processed grains, people feel better, they lose weight, diabetes gets better, and people feel empowered to continue because they're not hungry and they're feeling better. So, I became a doctor to help people get better. And I realized, our diabetes guidelines, someone comes in with diabetes, we're allowed to give them 3 months of diet and lifestyle. Now, given that our knowledge of diet and lifestyle is low-fat diet, normally people come back after 3 months, there's been no difference, their marker of blood sugar has gone up, so they get put on metformin. Now, there is another way. I'm not necessarily criticizing that way, although I think it is clearly suboptimal, but there's another way. If we get the information to help people in those 3 months make changes, you can pretty much always get their markers of blood sugar to come down in 3 months. You could do it in 1 month if you have the time and the knowledge to give them that sort of educational advice. And I guess that sort of brings in another factor, is the timing, how much time we have. Even if we had more time, we don't have the education to actually utilize that time properly with respect to nutritional advice.
Fantastic, Rangan. Honestly, this is music to my ears to hear from a GP, an NHS GP at that, that you're saying this. And kind of something that comes across to me there is that, we've got the science backing this way of eating and kind of the systems in place that people need to apply. But what we need to do, we need to get this information out to the masses in a way that's going to be approachable and applicable as well, and kind of using current references for people, like the whole beer belly thing, how much fat is in beer and how does that create a beer belly, and things like that is a perfect kind of analogy that almost everybody on the planet will kind of understand.
People get it.
Yeah, that's it. They just kind of get it when you start talking in their terms, and I think that's going to be kind of the thing that needs to be kind of ingrained, to use a better word, for GPs. So, kind of, do you feel that you're kind of part of the pioneering GPs that are out there that are going to be part of reversing the obesity, diabetes epidemic?
So yeah, I very much hope so, because I don't really preach this space. I live it. My wife and I, my two kids. This is how we eat. You know, we'll have, you know, my kids. My son's 4, my daughter's nearly 2. We'll sit around. You know, this morning, what do we have? Roast chicken, avocados, green beans. You know, you start kids off. You know, childhood obesity. In my practice in Oldham, my NHS practice, we've got at least 50% of the kids are obese already. You know, under 10s. It's so sad to see. And I want to be part of the voice that helps change this, because I'm passionate about it. I'm not faking this. I live it. I breathe it. I think it's so fundamental. I think one thing, though, is we've got to be very careful that we don't demonize another food group. You know, we've spent 40, 50 years absolutely demonizing fat, which is one of the reasons. I mean, there's multiple reasons why we're here, where we are today. But that's one of the big reasons, in my opinion. And I think we've got to be very careful we don't go from that extreme to demonizing all carbohydrates, which I think there is a tendency to do, to go to extreme views. Certainly, in my opinion, I happen to think that the majority of people, because they are out of balance and their insulin responses are so out of whack, I happen to think that most people will benefit, at least from a short period of time, on a low-carb diet. Now, that doesn't mean they have to stay on it forever, in my opinion. But I find it quite a useful tool, even an educational tool for people, just to learn about their bodies, learn about these hunger signals that are inbuilt. The only reason we've lost these natural hunger signals is because we have an abundance of, you know, crappy food out there that's actually, excuse my language, but it's really, I don't really know how else to say it.
It's a load of shit. It's a load of shit, Dr. Chatterjee. It's just total crap.
It's hijacking our hormones, and it's making us snack on rubbish for the rest of the day. And so, you know, I think we've got to be very clear about what we're trying to achieve. These things, diabetes is fully preventable, and in a lot of cases, you can reverse it. I'm saying that from my clinical experience. I've seen it happen. I see it happen every week because I preach this. I get groups of patients together at lunchtime so I can talk about this to a group of them in one go, because in 7 minutes, it's very, very hard to do that. But yeah, I want to be part of the change. I want to be part of, you know, bringing functional medicine to the mainstream, because functional medicine, again, this all links into the whole low-fat thing, because it's about how do you get to the root cause of problems? How do you make people get in touch with their bodies so they make the right decisions? And you know, functional medicine is going to be the future of medicine. I'm sure of it, because it really is. It's what we all became doctors for. Is how do you make people better? You know, after a while, it gets a bit boring just giving drugs to suppress symptoms. I mean, that's not really why I became a doctor. You may not know this, Sam, but the Cleveland Clinic in America, Cleveland Clinic, Mayo Clinic, 2 big, huge hospitals in America, they have just commissioned a whole center of functional medicine in one of their private hospitals because they've seen the value of this. They've seen the value when a doctor spends an hour with a patient and can actually, this is true preventative medicine. You know, we talk about prevention, but I don't think we really practice it. You know, we talk about, you know, a 50 million grant to find a cure for dementia. Fine, I understand why there's a desire for that, but there's such simple things we can do. And if we start with kids and at a young age, if we allow them to eat properly, they will make better choices, and that will relate to all kinds of chronic disease. So, yeah, Sam, in answer to your question, I want to be part of the change.
Most definitely, most definitely. And it's kind of interesting that medicine has almost had to have a rebrand. Almost, it seems, and it's a shame that it's just not medicine. This is how medicine should have been. Functional medicine is how medicine should have been from 200 years ago, ideally, when the first observations about refined grains starting to make people fat. basically. But kind of we went off the rails, thinking that drugs are the answer, and you just can't change people and things like that. But thankfully, we've got doctors like yourself, Dr. Chatterjee, that are completely changing the face of medicine, and kind of it's interviews like this that kind of brings a bit of sunshine to my heart, that the future is optimistic when it comes to health. So thank you for that. And on that note, do you have any last words of wisdom to our viewers and listeners out there?
Last words of wisdom. Well, first of all, thank you, Sam. Thank you for having me. It's great to have this opportunity. But you know what? If there's one thing I could say, start your day with a high-fat, high-protein breakfast and just see what happens.
Awesome, that is perfect advice right there. Fantastic. Well, people can check out your website and blog, which is drchatterjee.co.uk. So that's drchatterjee.co.uk. And then they can also follow you on Twitter under drchatterjeeuk, and finally check you out on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Dr. Chatterjee, I believe, is it?
Yeah, you did well there, Sam. Very, very good.
Yeah, it's well memorised. That's it. Fantastic. Cool. And then there's only one more thing to do, and that's to hear us smash it out for Dr. Rangan Chatterjee. So on 3, I want you to shout "smash it out" to the camera. So 1, 2, 3.
Smash it out!
Awesome, super. Well, I highly recommend everybody going to check out Dr. Chatterjee's blog. Some fantastic things on there, including the blog Why Low-Fat Eating Makes You Fat, along with an interview on Radio 5 Live about the obesity epidemic. So yeah, thanks again, Doc. Very much appreciated, and hopefully we'll get you back on the show soon.
Thanks, Sam.
Take care, mate.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.